if you can understand what it is about the diet, about the lifestyle that's so important, you could actually take that woman in San Francisco and reduce her risk of breast cancer by a third.
Meet Dr. Jason Fung, a Canadian nephrologist and a well-known expert on weight loss strategies. His innovative study has changed the way many people think about metabolic illnesses. Dr. Fung's research and writings explore the link between nutrition, metabolism, and chronic diseases, including cancer. He emphasizes the significance of insulin and glucose in fueling cancer cells, a hypothesis based on the Warburg effect, which states that cancer cells thrive on glucose for energy. Dr. Fung's studies on fasting and metabolic management have opened up new possibilities for studying cancer prevention and treatment through dietary therapies. In this video, we will highlight the 5 worst foods that feed cancer cells, as studied and recommended by Dr. Jason Fung. Excluding these foods from our diet can potentially decrease the risk of cancer and give us an additional line of defense against this chronic disease. This underscores the importance and effects of diet on our overall health. And that's just the beginning. By the end of the video, we will also share Dr. Fung's secret and unique strategy for reducing the risk of cancer. So stay tuned with us until the end. But before exploring the worst foods that feed cancer cells, let's hear what Dr. Fung has to say about what causes cancer.
In the 90s, so I went to medical school in the 90s, we talked about cancer, and people had this idea that it was this genetic disease. It was actually not until 2003 when the first kind of convincing evidence came out that, hey, cancer is an obesity-related disease. And it turns out that it was a huge part of cancer. That is, if you look at the causes of cancers.
Dr. Jason Fung highlights that cancer is closely linked to obesity, a connection often overlooked in mainstream health discussions. Excess body fat, particularly visceral fat, creates a pro-inflammatory environment in the body, fostering conditions that encourage cancer development, including breast, colon, and liver cancer. Obesity also alters the body's hormone balance, leading to higher levels of estrogen, which provides fertile ground for cancer cells to grow.
That insulin is a major growth factor as well. And that is the link to a lot of these cancers. So breast cancer and colorectal cancer being the 2 most prominent obesity-related cancers, but also pancreatic and liver and so on. So hyperinsulinemia turns out to play a sort of huge role in those as well, and that's sort of linked through several different growth-stimulating mechanisms.
Obesity often leads to insulin resistance, where the body produces more insulin to manage blood sugar, feeding the cancer cells even more. Insulin, a hormone responsible for regulating blood sugar, can act as a growth promoter when present at high levels, leading to the rapid growth of cancer cells. Dr. Fung explains that cancer cells thrive on glucose through the Warburg effect, a phenomenon where cancer cells consume sugar at a much faster rate than normal cells. This dependency on glucose makes elevated insulin levels a dangerous contributor to cancer.
So it really depends on what type of cancer you're talking. Like if you're talking lung cancer, obesity plays almost no role in it, right? That's smoking. Or if you have asbestos, which causes mesothelioma, which is a cancer of the lining of the lung, again, obesity plays no role. But things like breast cancer and colorectal cancer, which are sort of really important cancers.
But remember, while diet modifications can prove to be helpful in protection from cancer, they cannot be termed as an alternative to medical procedures. So, you must refer to your doctor for a personalized approach before making any changes to your diet plan. Saying this, let's explore the 5 worst foods that can fuel cancer cells in our bodies.
One of the things that wound up adding was the sugar. You don't put sugar on eggs, for example. You don't put sugar on your sausages, for example, but you will do that on your oatmeal, for example, or your cereal or other things like that. And the sugar is very dangerous to weight gain.
Sugar is the first and most discussed food by Dr. Jason Fung in the development and progression of cancer, underlining it as one of the worst foods for cancer patients and those aiming to prevent the disease. While normal cells can switch between using fats, proteins, and carbohydrates for fuel, cancer cells are heavily dependent on glucose. According to Dr. Fung, this glucose addiction makes sugar one of the most dangerous substances for cancer patients, as it directly feeds the growth of cancer cells. And it's not only glucose, the relationship between sugar and cancer is further amplified by the fact that consuming sugar spikes insulin levels. Insulin is not just a hormone that controls blood sugar, it also acts as a growth factor for cells. Elevated insulin levels, common in people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, have been associated with increased cancer risk. Dr. Fung points out that high insulin promotes the growth of cancer cells in the same way it promotes the growth of normal cells. This could be the reason why people with obesity, diabetes, or insulin resistance have a higher incidence of cancers such as breast, colon, and pancreatic cancer. Statistical data supports this alarming connection between sugar and cancer. A large-scale study published in The Lancet found that obese individuals were up to 50% more likely to develop cancer than those of normal weight, and much of this risk is driven by insulin and glucose metabolism.
Probably one of the very, very important things that we really need to lower, because that really supports it, and it gets to how cancer develops.
For those looking to cut sugar from their diets, there are healthier alternatives that can satisfy cravings without promoting cancer growth. Stevia and monk fruit are popular sugar substitutes that don't raise insulin levels and have a low glycemic index. These natural sweeteners provide the sweetness of sugar without the harmful impact on insulin and glucose metabolism. Similar to sugar, carbohydrates are some of the worst foods for cancer due to their direct impact on glucose and insulin levels. Refined carbohydrates are stripped of fiber, vitamins, and minerals during processing, leaving behind simple starches that quickly break down into glucose in the body. This rapid conversion leads to spikes in blood sugar and insulin, creating a perfect environment for cancer cells to thrive. Refined carbohydrates, which cause glucose levels to surge, serve as a direct fuel source for these cells, promoting their growth and proliferation.
Highly refined carbohydrates are going to spike up your glucose, which is going to spike up your insulin. And then, because the high insulin just takes all that energy and sucks it into storage, there's no energy left for you.
And this is not all. Dr. Fung explains that the frequent consumption of refined carbs, such as white bread, pasta, and processed snacks, promotes insulin resistance. As insulin levels remain elevated, the body's cells become less responsive to it, requiring more insulin to manage blood sugar levels. This constant overstimulation of insulin has been shown to increase the risk of various cancers, including breast, colon, and endometrial cancer. Moving ahead, we face another risk factor: obesity. Obesity, driven largely by overconsumption of refined carbs and sugar, leads to chronic inflammation and hormonal imbalances, both of which are linked to increased cancer risk. Dr. Fung notes that managing insulin resistance through dietary changes is crucial for both weight control and cancer prevention. To stay healthy, focus on whole, nutrient-dense foods instead of refined carbohydrates that don't spike blood sugar or insulin. Replacing refined carbs with healthy fats, such as avocados, olive oil, and nuts, can help stabilize blood sugar and reduce insulin levels. Whole grains, legumes, and vegetables with low glycemic indices are better alternatives as they digest more slowly, providing a steady source of energy without feeding cancer cells. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. If you find our videos helpful, please support us by dropping your comments in the comments section. Now, let's move forward and discuss our next risk factor. High glycemic foods are among the worst contributors to cancer growth, as they significantly raise blood sugar levels. According to Dr. Fung, this process creates a metabolic environment that is highly favorable for cancer cell proliferation. High glycemic foods such as white bread, sugary cereals, pastries, and processed snacks cause rapid glucose absorption in the bloodstream. Cancer cells, which rely heavily on glucose for energy, thrive in such an environment.
Every time you are eating, you're stimulating your insulin, which is giving growth signals to the cells, including the cancer cells, which love insulin. You look at a breast cancer cell, for example, has like 5 or 6 times the number of insulin receptors compared to a normal breast cell. They love this stuff. They love insulin, they love glucose. So therefore, you want to lower it. So eating sort of whole, unprocessed foods is important. That's probably the most important thing.
Dr. Fung's primary concern with high glycemic foods is their effect on insulin, a hormone that regulates blood sugar. Elevated insulin levels stimulate the growth of cells, including cancer cells. Over time, consistently high insulin levels, driven by frequent consumption of high glycemic foods, lead to insulin resistance, where the body's cells become less responsive to insulin. As a result, the pancreas produces even more insulin to compensate. This cycle creates an environment where cancer cells, already thriving on glucose, are fed an abundance of insulin and sugar, accelerating their growth. Dr. Fung believes that insulin acts like a fertilizer for cancer, promoting its spread and making high glycemic foods particularly dangerous. But you should not worry and adopt suitable alternatives to high glycemic foods, including whole grains like quinoa and oats, which release glucose slowly. Vegetables like broccoli, spinach, and kale are also low glycemic and rich in cancer-fighting nutrients. Healthy fats such as avocados, nuts, and seeds can replace high glycemic snacks, providing sustained energy without spiking blood sugar. By adopting a low glycemic, nutrient-rich diet, individuals can lower their insulin levels and potentially reduce the risk of cancer. Next on our list are processed proteins, and they are really bad for our health.
There's a big difference between bologna and, grass-finished beef sort of thing. There's a huge difference because one is jam-packed full of chemicals and other crap, and one is just beef, right? And people have been eating beef for thousands of years.
Processed meats, like sausages, bacon, and deli meats, are not only high in unhealthy fats, but also contain harmful additives, such as nitrates and nitrites, which have been linked to an increased risk of cancer. According to Dr. Fung, the consumption of these processed proteins drives inflammation, disrupts the body's natural metabolic balance, and encourages the growth of cancerous cells. The key issue lies in the processing methods used, which introduce carcinogenic compounds that fuel cancer development. One significant concern is the formation of nitrosamines, compounds formed when nitrates interact with proteins under high temperatures, such as during grilling or frying. Nitrosamines have been identified as potent carcinogens that damage DNA and contribute to cancerous mutations. The World Health Organization, WHO, has classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, meaning there is strong evidence to suggest they cause cancer. A 2015 report by the WHO found that eating just 50 grams of processed meat per day, equivalent to about 2 slices of bacon, increases the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. This alarming statistic highlights the significant cancer risk posed by even moderate consumption of processed proteins. More to this, the American Institute for Cancer Research has pointed out that high consumption of processed meats is associated with an increased risk of stomach cancer, particularly due to the high salt and preservative content. These findings align with Dr. Fung's theory that the long-term intake of processed proteins accelerates the growth of cancer cells. Do you know that processed proteins also pose significant cancer risk through the process of glycation, where sugars bind to proteins and fats, creating harmful compounds known as advanced glycation end products? They contribute to oxidative stress and inflammation, both of which are known to drive cancer growth. Processed meats are particularly high in glycan end products due to their preparation methods, such as smoking and grilling at high temperatures. What is the way out then? Grass-fed meats, wild-caught fish, organic poultry, and plant-based proteins such as legumes and nuts. These natural proteins are free from harmful additives, are less likely to spike insulin levels, and do not contain the carcinogenic compounds found in processed meats. Our last cancer ally comes out to be processed fats. Processed fats, especially omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, can trigger inflammation in the body, which is a key factor in cancer development. Chronic inflammation creates an environment that allows cancer cells to thrive and spread.
1989, they had already were having evidence that eating a lot of these vegetable oils was actually very, very harmful. And a reanalysis by Ramsden in 2013 showed the same thing. If you actually look at all the polyunsaturated fatty acid studies and then break them down according to whether or not they contain omega-3s or omega-6s, because both are polyunsaturated, what you find in the top part there is that if you look at studies that primarily increase omega-6 fatty acids, so vegetable oils, you have an increased mortality.
One of the significant issues with processed fats is their high level of oxidation, especially when heated during processing or cooking. Oxidized fats produce harmful compounds called free radicals, which can damage cells and DNA, increasing the risk of mutations that lead to cancer. Research has found that diets high in omega-6 fats are associated with an increased risk of several cancers, including breast, prostate, and colon cancer. Dr. Fung also points to the imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3 fats in the modern diet as a major problem. Traditionally, human diets had a balanced ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats, typically between 1:1 and 4:1. However, with the widespread use of processed vegetable oils, the ratio in many Western diets has shifted to 15:1 or even 20:1, favoring omega-6 fats. This imbalance is linked to higher rates of inflammation and, consequently, cancer development. Adding to this imbalance, the consumption of processed fats contributes to insulin resistance and disrupts cellular metabolism, a concept often referred to as metabolic dysfunction, which is believed to create an ideal environment for cancer cells to proliferate. To help reduce your cancer risk, Dr. Fung advocates replacing processed fats with healthier alternatives. These include extra virgin olive oil is rich in monounsaturated fats. Olive oil has been shown to reduce inflammation and protect against several cancers, including breast and colon cancer. Avocado oil, high in heart-healthy fats and antioxidants. Avocados and their oil are excellent for lowering inflammation and supporting cellular health. Finally, let's explore Dr. Fung's secret strategies that can potentially help us fight and prevent various diseases like cancer. One of his primary recommendations is to undergo ketosis. According to Dr. Fung, the ketogenic diet, which is high in fats and extremely low in carbohydrates, forces the body to enter a state of ketosis, where it burns fat for energy instead of glucose. This results in lower insulin levels, as carbohydrates and sugars are the main triggers for insulin release.
Cheese, full-fat milk, it does not lead to an increased risk of heart disease, but could protect you against something like diabetes, which does raise your risk of heart disease. And that's why the ketogenic diet has been favored by some physicians.
Complementing the ketogenic diet, Dr. Fung's main strategy is known as intermittent fasting. This fasting gives the body extended periods without food, further reducing insulin levels. Dr. Fung argues that fasting triggers autophagy, a process in which the body cleans out damaged cells and regenerates healthier ones, which can help reduce the risk of cancer. He explains that fasting also depletes the body's glucose stores, making it difficult for cancer cells, which depend on glucose for rapid growth, to thrive.
Now you have 14 different cancers which are defined as obesity-associated cancers. So therefore, fasting, if it helps with that, presumably is also going to lower your risk. And these include some of the most important cancers like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, for example, pancreatic cancer.